Close your eyes for just a moment and imagine meeting the person you have always dreamed of becoming. Imagine standing face to face with the version of yourself who has already achieved everything you desire. This person is confident where you are uncertain, peaceful where you are anxious, successful where you are struggling, and fulfilled where you feel incomplete. Now imagine that instead of looking at you with disappointment, this future version smiles and says, "I've been waiting for you. I've been calling you all along." What if that isn't just imagination? What if every dream that keeps returning to your heart is actually an invitation from your future self? What if the life you long for isn't something far away, but something trying to emerge through your own consciousness? Most people believe they are chasing their future, but Neville Goddard suggested something far more profound. Your future is already complete, and your task is simply to step into it. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives looking backward. They replay old failures, old disappointments, and old limitations until those memories become their identity. They wake up expecting yesterday to repeat itself, and because they expect it, they unknowingly create it again. The past becomes a prison, not because it has power over them, but because they continue to give it power through their attention. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind reminds you of what went wrong? It tells you why you cannot succeed, why you are not ready, why others have opportunities that you don't, and why your circumstances seem impossible to change. These thoughts feel real because they have been repeated so often. But repetition does not make them truth. It simply makes them familiar. Neville Goddard taught that imagination creates reality. This means the story you tell yourself every single day is not just describing your life, it is shaping it. Every assumption you accept becomes a blueprint for future experience. Every emotion you repeatedly entertain plants seeds in the invisible world that eventually appear as visible circumstances. Think about that for a moment. The future you desire may not be blocked by the economy, by luck, by timing, or by other people. It may only be waiting for you to become the version of yourself who naturally belongs there. So many people ask, when will my life finally change? But perhaps that is the wrong question. Perhaps the better question is, when will I stop identifying with the person who believes change is impossible? Because the moment your identity shifts, everything around you begins to reorganize itself. Imagine a gardener planting seeds beneath the soil. For days or even weeks, nothing appears on the surface. An impatient observer would conclude that nothing is happening. Yet beneath the ground, life is already unfolding. Roots are forming. Growth is taking place in silence. The absence of visible evidence does not mean the absence of progress. Your imagination works exactly the same way. Every time you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, every time you choose faith over fear, every time you refuse to surrender to appearances, you are planting invisible seeds. They may not be visible today, but they are alive. They are growing beneath the surface of your current reality. The greatest mistake people make is abandoning those seeds before they have time to bloom. They dig them up with doubt. They water them with fear. They compare their journey to someone else's and convince themselves that nothing is happening. Yet the universe often works in silence long before it reveals its masterpiece. Your future self understands this. Your future self is patient because your future self already knows the outcome. It does not panic when circumstances look uncertain. It does not lose faith because of temporary setbacks. It has already experienced the victory that your present mind cannot yet see. Every desire you carry is evidence that another possibility exists within you. You would not hunger for abundance if abundance were impossible for your consciousness. You would not imagine peace if peace were beyond your reach. You would not envision success if success were foreign to your being. Those visions appear because they belong to states you are capable of occupying. Today is not simply another day on the calendar. It is an invitation. It is an opportunity to stop letting yesterday define tomorrow. It is a chance to answer the quiet voice that has been whispering through your dreams, your intuition, and your deepest desires. That voice is your future self. It has been calling you every time you refuse to settle for less than your potential. It has been calling you every time you felt there had to be more to life than your current circumstances. It has been calling you through every impossible dream that refused to disappear. The question is no longer whether your future exists. The question is whether you are willing to believe in it before your eyes can confirm it. Because the greatest transformations in history have never begun with proof. They have begun with belief. They have begun with someone daring to imagine a reality that others could not yet see. And perhaps today that someone is you. As we continue this journey together, prepare to leave behind the identity built by fear and limitation. Prepare to discover that the person you are becoming has been reaching toward you all along. The bridge between your present and your destiny is not built with force or struggle. It is built with imagination, persistence, and the courage to live as though your highest vision is already true. Your future self is calling. The only question that remains is whether you are ready to answer. I'd be happy to continue. Here's part 20. Why most people stay trapped in their past, approximately 5 minutes, in the same motivational, flowing style. There is an invisible chain that holds millions of people back, and surprisingly, it is not made of failure, poverty, rejection, or bad luck. It is made of memory. The past has an incredible ability to convince us that it defines who we are, and if we are not careful, we begin to believe that yesterday has more power than tomorrow. Think about how often people introduce themselves through their struggles. They say, "I've always been unlucky, nothing ever works out for me," or "I'm just not the kind of person who succeeds." They may not realize it, but with every repetition, they strengthen the identity they are trying to escape. They stop seeing those experiences as events that happened to them and start seeing them as permanent descriptions of who they are. Neville Goddard believed that consciousness is the one and only reality. If that is true, then the stories we constantly replay in our minds become the foundation of the world we experience. The problem is not that difficult things happened in the past. The problem is that we continue to relive them long after they are over, giving them fresh life every single day. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase filled with old photographs, broken dreams, regrets, and disappointments. At first, the weight might seem manageable, but after years of carrying it, you begin to believe it is part of your body. You forget what it feels like to walk freely. The suitcase becomes so familiar that you no longer question whether you should put it down. This is exactly how many people live. They wake up expecting disappointment because disappointment has become familiar. They expect rejection because rejection has become their identity. They expect failure because failure has become the lens through which they view every opportunity. Even when something good begins to happen, they often sabotage it because it feels unfamiliar. The mind always seeks what feels normal, even if normal is painful. That is why two people can experience the same setback and create completely different futures. One person sees a closed door and concludes that life is against them. The other sees the same closed door and believes it is redirecting them towards something greater. The event is identical, but the meaning assigned to it creates two completely different realities. Most people are not trapped by circumstances. They are trapped by the meanings they have attached to those circumstances. Perhaps someone once told you that you were not talented enough. Perhaps you experienced betrayal that convinced you not to trust again. Maybe financial hardship made you believe abundance was reserved for other people. These experiences may have been real, but they do not have to become permanent truths. The danger lies in allowing temporary moments to become lifelong identities. Neville often reminded his students that imagination is greater than memory. Memory simply repeats what has already happened. Imagination creates what has never existed before. Yet most people spend hours remembering and only moments imagining. They rehearse old conversations instead of creating new ones. They replay failures instead of envisioning victories. Without realizing it, they become architects of repetition instead of transformation. Consider a mirror covered in dust. If you look into it, you may think the reflection itself is flawed, when in reality the surface only needs cleaning. Your consciousness works the same way. The doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs that cloud your vision are not your true identity. They are layers accumulated through years of repetition. Beneath them is the creative power capable of imagining an entirely different future. This is why so many people feel stuck even when opportunities surround them. They cannot recognize new possibilities because they are filtering every experience through old beliefs. They may receive a chance to grow but reject it because they secretly believe they are unworthy. They may meet someone who genuinely cares for them but push them away because they expect abandonment. Their assumptions quietly shape their decisions, and their decisions recreate the very life they wish to escape. The greatest prison is not built with walls. It is built with beliefs. And the key has always been in your hands. Your future cannot fully arrive while you insist on carrying an outdated version of yourself into every new moment. At some point, you must make a conscious decision to release the identity that no longer serves you. You must stop introducing yourself through your wounds and begin introducing yourself through your possibilities. This does not mean pretending the past never happened. It means refusing to let it dictate what happens next. The lessons remain, but the limitations do not. The memories remain, but the identity changes. Every sunrise offers a quiet reminder that nature itself never clings to yesterday. The seasons move forward without apology. Trees do not refuse to bloom because they lost their leaves in winter. Rivers do not flow backward because they encountered rocks along the way. Everything in creation is designed to move toward renewal. You are no different. The person you were 5 years ago does not have to decide who you become 5 years from now. In fact, the version of yourself that is calling you forward is waiting for one simple choice: the decision to stop living from memory and start living from possibility. When you finally understand that your past is a chapter rather than the entire story, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "Who do I choose to become because of it?" That single shift changes everything, because the moment you stop letting yesterday speak louder than tomorrow, you create space for a completely new identity to emerge. And it is from that new identity, not from your old history, that your future will be born. I'd be glad to continue. Here's Part 30, Neville Goddard's Principle, Living from the Ends, approximately 5 minutes A's. Written in the same inspirational and continuous style for your voice over narration. There is one idea at the heart of Neville Goddard's teachings that has the power to transform every area of your life. It is simple to understand, yet it requires courage to practice. He called it Azera's living from the enders. It is the decision to think, feel, and imagine from the place where your desire has already been fulfilled rather than from the place where you are still waiting for it. Most people live in reverse. They tell themselves, when I get the job, then I'll feel successful. When I find the relationship, then I'll feel loved. When I make more money, then I'll feel secure. Their emotions depend entirely on circumstances, so they spend their lives chasing a future that always seems one step ahead. Neville challenged that way of thinking. He taught that the outer world is not the cause of your inner state. Instead, your inner state is the cause of your outer world. In other words, you do not wait for life to change before you believe. You believe first, and then life begins to reflect that belief. Imagine an actor stepping onto a stage. Before the audience arrives, before the lights come on, before a single line is spoken, the actor already knows the role they are playing. They do not wonder who they are every few minutes. They fully occupy the character until it feels natural. Neville believed that life works in much the same way. The role you consistently identify with becomes the role reality presents back to you. If you constantly identify as someone who struggles, you will notice more evidence of struggle. If you identify as someone who is overlooked, you will continue to see situations that reinforce that belief. But when you begin identifying as someone who is confident, capable, abundant, and loved, your perception changes. You notice opportunities that once seemed invisible. You respond differently to challenges. Your actions become aligned with a new identity, and over time, your external circumstances begin to mirror that inner transformation. Living from the end does not mean pretending problems do not exist. It means refusing to let temporary appearances decide your permanent identity. It is the quiet confidence of someone who has already accepted the outcome in their heart, even while the world is still catching up. Think of a seed planted beneath the earth. The gardener does not dig it up every morning to check if it is growing. They trust the process. They water it, care for it, and expect it to bloom because they understand the unseen work taking place beneath the surface. In the same way, living from the end requires trusting that your inner assumptions are taking root long before physical evidence appears. This is why Neville emphasized feeling so strongly. He often said that feeling is the secret. It is not enough to repeat empty words if your heart remains filled with doubt. You must enter the emotional atmosphere of your fulfilled desire. If you want peace, begin to feel peaceful now. If you desire abundance, cultivate gratitude as though abundance already surrounds you. If you long for love, carry yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are deeply valued. Your emotions become the language through which your subconscious accepts new instructions. Many people ask, but how can I feel successful when I have failed so many times? How can I feel wealthy when my bank account says otherwise? The answer lies in understanding that imagination is not limited by current conditions. Your imagination is the workshop where tomorrow is built. If you only allow yourself to feel according to what you currently see, you give the present complete authority over the future. But if you dare to imagine beyond appearances, you reclaim your creative power. Consider a sculptor standing before a block of marble. To everyone else, it looks like ordinary stone. But in the sculptor's mind, the masterpiece already exists. Every strike of the chisel is guided by a vision that cannot yet be seen by others. The artist does not create the statue out of nothing. They reveal what they already know is there. Your future works the same way. When you live from the end, you stop asking whether your dream is possible and begin asking how you can embody it more completely today. You stop measuring progress only by external results and start measuring it by the consistency of your inner state. You become less concerned with how quickly circumstances change and more committed to remaining faithful to the person you have chosen to become. This practice requires persistence because the world will often tempt you back into old patterns. Unexpected setbacks may appear. Delays may challenge your confidence. Doubts may whisper that nothing is happening. Yet each of those moments offers a choice. Will you return to the identity built by fear, or will you remain loyal to the vision you have accepted within? Neville believed that persistence in the assumption of your wish fulfilled is the secret to success. Not because persistence forces reality to obey you, but because persistence keeps you rooted in the state from which new experiences naturally emerge. Imagine waking tomorrow with absolute certainty that your deepest desire is already on its way. How would you walk? How would you speak? What decisions would you make? Would you carry the same anxiety, or would there be a quiet confidence in your actions? That version of you is not waiting in some distant future. It is available in this very moment. Living from the end is ultimately an act of trust. It is choosing faith over fear, possibility over limitation, and imagination over memory. It is believing that your inner world is not a fantasy, but the blueprint from which your outer world is formed. So stop waiting for permission from circumstances. Stop asking the mirror to smile before you do. Become the person you wish to be now. Think their thoughts. Feel their emotions. Make your decisions from their perspective. Let your imagination become so vivid that your current reality can no longer compete with the certainty of what you know is possible. Because when you truly begin living from the end, you are no longer chasing your future. You are welcoming it into the present. And that is the moment everything begins to change. There is a point in every awakening journey where a person begins to sense something unusual. It is not a sound you hear with your ears, nor a sight you see with your eyes, yet it feels realer than both. It is the quiet awareness that your life is not random, and that somewhere within you, a greater version of yourself already exists, waiting, guiding, and gently calling you forward. Neville Goddard described imagination as the true creative power of human consciousness. Not imagination as fantasy or escape, but imagination as the bridge between what is and what can be. When you begin to understand this, you realize something profound. Your future self is not far away in time. It is present in consciousness. It is a state you can enter right now, simply by shifting where you are mentally and emotionally. Most people believe the future is something that happens to them. They think time moves forward and eventually delivers a new life. But in truth, consciousness moves first and time follows. The future does not arrive randomly. It is drawn from the inner states you consistently occupy. And this means something extraordinary. Your future self is not waiting at the end of time. It is waiting at the edge of your imagination. Think of imagination as a doorway. On one side is the identity you currently wear, shaped by memory, habit, and past experience. On the other side is the identity you are capable of becoming, free, fulfilled, confident, and aligned with your deepest desire. Every time you consciously imagine yourself living a fulfilled life, you are stepping through that doorway, even if only for a moment. This is why Neville emphasized the importance of assumption. To assume a state is to temporarily accept it as real. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are not pretending, you are practicing identity. You are training your consciousness to recognize a different version of reality as natural. Now imagine something simple but powerful. Picture yourself in the future, not as a stranger, but as yourself fully expressed. You are calm, certain, and at peace. You are no longer asking whether things will work out because they already have. In that imagined moment, someone approaches you and congratulates you. They speak words that confirm your desire has been fulfilled. Notice how that scene feels. Notice how naturally your mind begins to accept it, even if only briefly. that feeling is not meaningless. According to Neville, feeling is the language of creation. What you emotionally accept within imagination becomes the seed of your outer experience. The more real you make that inner experience, the more familiar your subconscious becomes with that state. And what the subconscious accepts as true, it begins to express outwardly through behavior, opportunity, and circumstance. Meeting your future self is not a dramatic event, it is subtle. It happens in moments of stillness, when you close your eyes and shift your attention away from what is currently happening and into what could already be true. In that space, you begin to notice something strange. Your future self does not feel foreign. It feels familiar. It feels like remembrance rather than invention. This is because your future self is not being created in that moment. It is being recognized. Every desire you carry is a clue. It is not random. It is not accidental. It is a reflection of a state that already exists within the infinite possibilities of consciousness. When you desire peace, there is a version of you already living in peace. When you desire success, there is a version of you already expressing it. When you desire love, there is a version of you already experiencing it fully. Your imagination is the space where you meet that version and begin to merge with it. However, most people interrupt this process too quickly. They imagine briefly, then immediately return to doubt. They create a mental image and then erase it with logic. They feel the possibility for a moment, then collapse it under the weight of current circumstances. And so the bridge between present and future is never fully crossed. Neville's teaching invites you to stay longer, not through force, but through gentle persistence, to dwell in the assumption just enough that it begins to feel natural, to let the imagined state become emotionally familiar, because what feels natural to you becomes your dominant expression over time. When you begin practicing this regularly, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. Your inner conversations change. You stop thinking as someone who is lacking and start thinking as someone who is becoming. Your emotional reactions soften. Your expectations shift. You begin to notice possibilities that were always there but previously invisible to your old identity. And slowly, almost quietly, your outer world begins to reflect this inner shift. Meeting your future self through imagination is not about escaping reality. It is about entering the deeper layer of reality where all possibilities already exist. It is about remembering that you are not trapped in a single version of life. You are moving through states, and each state contains a different version of your future. So when you close your eyes and imagine, you are not dreaming, you are aligning. You are not pretending, you are selecting. You are not waiting for a future self to arrive. You are stepping into it, one assumption at a time. And the more often you return to that inner meeting place, the more natural it becomes to live as that version of you in the world outside. Because in the end, your future self is not calling you from far away. It is calling you from within. Understanding Neville Goddard's teachings is powerful, but transformation only begins when understanding turns into practice. The imagination is not meant to be admired. It is meant to be used. And the life you experience is shaped not by occasional inspiration, but by the mental habits you repeat every single day. The first and most important habit is how you begin your morning. Most people wake up and immediately reconnect with the same identity they had yesterday. They remember their problems, check their phone, think about obligations, and step straight back into the same mental state that created their current life. But if consciousness creates reality, then your first thoughts in the morning are not small. They are foundational. Instead of reacting to the world, begin your day by entering the world you wish to experience. For a few moments, before anything else, Assume the feeling of your wish already fulfilled. It does not need to be complicated. It can be a simple inner awareness. I am already the person I desire to be. Sit in that feeling quietly. Let it settle. Do not force it. Just allow your mind to accept it as natural. This morning assumption acts like setting the direction of a compass. The rest of your day will unconsciously follow the state you begin with. The second habit is awareness of your inner conversation. Most people underestimate how constantly they speak to themselves. Every judgment, fear, doubt, and expectation becomes part of a continuous internal dialogue. Neville Goddard emphasized that what you consistently say to yourself becomes the framework your subconscious accepts as truth. If you repeatedly tell yourself that things are difficult, your mind will organize your perception around difficulty. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are behind, your experiences will reflect delay and limitation. But if you begin to gently shift that inner conversation, without forcing, without struggle, you begin to reshape your emotional baseline. When a negative thought arises, you do not need to fight it. Simply withdraw your attention and return to the state you are choosing. You are not trying to control every thought, you are choosing which thoughts to live from. The third habit is mental rehearsal before sleep. The moments before you fall asleep are incredibly powerful because the mind becomes receptive and less resistant. In this state, whatever you dwell upon is more easily absorbed into the subconscious. Instead of ending your day by replaying worries or unresolved problems, choose to enter a scene that implies your desire is already fulfilled. It does not need to be elaborate. It could be a conversation where someone congratulates you, a moment of peace in your ideal home, or the simple feeling of satisfaction that your goal has been achieved. The key is emotional acceptance. You are not forcing belief, you are gently allowing it. Over time, this nightly practice becomes a seed that grows silently beneath your awareness. The fourth habit is emotional discipline throughout the day. This does not mean suppressing feelings, but rather not allowing external circumstances to define your internal state. If something challenges you, you pause and ask, "Is this aligned with the person I am becoming?" This question alone can interrupt old patterns and return you to conscious choice. Neville Goddard taught that states of consciousness are like garments you can put on and take off. Throughout the day, you may find yourself slipping into fear, doubt, or impatience, but you are not required to stay there. You can return to the state of the wish fulfilled at any moment simply by choosing it again. The fifth habit is persistence without dependence on evidence. This is where many people struggle. They begin imagining, affirming, and feeling, but when the outer world does not immediately respond, they lose faith. Yet Neville consistently reminded his students that persistence is what brings the unseen into the seen. Reality has a delay, but consciousness does not. Just because you do not see immediate results does not mean nothing is happening. Beneath the surface, your assumptions are reorganizing your perception, your decisions, and your emotional responses. What you hold consistently within will eventually express itself without. So your task is not to monitor progress, it is to remain faithful to the state you have chosen. Finally, the most important habit of all is self-identity awareness. Throughout the day, you must gently observe, who am I being right now? Not as judgment, but as awareness. Am I being the version of myself that lives in limitation, or the version that lives in fulfillment? Every moment is a chance to return. Every thought is an opportunity to realign. Every emotion is a signal pointing you back to your chosen state. When these practices become consistent, something subtle begins to change. You stop feeling like you are trying to become someone new, and instead begin to feel like you are remembering who you already are. Life stops feeling like a struggle against reality and starts feeling like a steady unfolding of an inner state. And slowly, almost quietly, the outer world begins to follow. Because in truth, your daily habits are not just routines. They are instructions being written into reality itself. There comes a moment in every person's journey where effort is no longer enough, where trying harder, thinking harder, and chasing harder begin to feel exhausting. It is at this point that a deeper truth begins to emerge, one that Neville Goddard pointed toward again and again. The truth is simple, yet it changes everything. Your life is not shaped by what you do, but by the state of consciousness you occupy while doing it. Most people live from the outside in. They look at their circumstances and then decide how to feel. If things appear good, they feel good. If things appear bad, they feel anxious, discouraged, or doubtful. Their emotional state becomes a reaction to the world. But this creates a cycle where nothing truly changes, because the inner state is always following the outer world instead of leading it. Neville Goddard reversed this entirely. He taught that consciousness is the only reality, meaning your inner state is not a reflection of your life, it is the cause of it. When this is truly understood, a profound shift happens. You stop asking, "How do I fix my situation?" and begin asking, "Who am I being within my situation?" This is the mindset shift that changes everything. Instead of identifying with circumstances, you begin identifying with states. A state is not just a thought or emotion. It is an entire version of you, complete with beliefs, expectations, and assumptions about reality. There is a version of you that lives in fear, constantly anticipating loss and disappointment. There is also a version of you that lives in confidence, certainty, and fulfillment. Both exist in imagination. The only question is which one you choose to inhabit. When you begin to see life this way, you realize something powerful. You are not trying to change your life directly. You are changing the state from which your life is being experienced. And as the state shifts, your perception shifts. And as your perception shifts, your actions shift. And as your actions shift, your external reality begins to reorganize itself accordingly. This is why Neville often emphasized that circumstances are effects, not causes. What you see in the world is the result of previous states you have occupied. But because most people are unaware of this, they react to effects instead of changing the cause. They try to fix shadows without touching the object casting them. The real shift begins when you stop measuring reality by appearances and start measuring it by state. You begin to ask not, "What is happening around me?" but, "What is happening within me right now?" Because what is happening within you is what is being impressed upon the creative field of consciousness. This understanding brings a new kind of freedom. It means you are never truly stuck. You are never waiting for permission from the world. You are always one shift in awareness away from a different experience of life. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One believes the situation defines them. They feel powerless, frustrated, and overwhelmed. The other understands that the situation is simply a reflection of a temporary state. They remain calm, centered, and internally aligned with the outcome they desire. The external event is the same, but the internal experience is completely different. And over time, that internal difference determines what unfolds next. This is the turning point when you realize you do not need to wait for life to improve in order to feel different. You can feel differently first, and life will follow. But this shift requires something most people struggle with: detachment from appearances. It means no longer allowing the outer world to dictate your identity. It means trusting what is unseen more than what is seen. It means holding on to your chosen state even when nothing around you confirms it yet. At first, This feels unnatural because the mind has been trained to rely on evidence. But Neville's teaching invites you to live from imagination instead of observation, to assume that what you desire is already true within consciousness, even if it has not yet appeared in form. When you begin practicing this consistently, something subtle happens. You stop reacting to every fluctuation in your environment. You become steadier, quieter within yourself. You no longer collapse into doubt every time something delays or challenges you. Instead, you return to your chosen state again and again, like coming home. And over time, this repetition creates a new identity. Because identity is not what you say once, it is what you return to consistently. Eventually, you begin to notice that your external world no longer feels like a fixed structure you must fight against. It starts to feel like a mirror responding to your inner state. And in that realization, the struggle begins to dissolve. This is the shift that changes everything, moving from reacting to reality, to consciously selecting the state from which reality is formed. Once this is understood, you are no longer at the mercy of circumstances. You are the one defining them from within. There is a point in every journey of transformation where understanding is no longer enough. You begin to know the principles, you begin to practice the techniques, yet the outer world may still look unchanged for a time. This is where most people give up, not because the teaching failed, but because they misinterpret the delay. Neville Goddard repeatedly emphasized that persistence is what separates imagination that fades away from imagination that becomes lived reality. Think of a person who has been struggling financially for years. One day, they come across the idea that consciousness creates reality. Something inside them clicks. For the first time, they begin imagining themselves as financially secure. They start feeling gratitude before evidence appears. They fall asleep in the assumption that things are improving, but after a few days or weeks, nothing seems different externally. Bills still arrive, challenges still appear, and slowly doubt begins to creep in. This is the moment where the entire process is either strengthened or abandoned. Neville would say that the unseen world has already begun responding, but the physical world takes time to reflect it. The delay is not a denial, it is simply the unfolding process of consciousness becoming form. But because people are conditioned to rely on immediate evidence, they assume nothing is happening and return to their old state. Now consider another example. A person desires healing in a certain area of life. They begin imagining themselves whole, healthy, and restored. At first, it feels inspiring. They feel a sense of relief. But when symptoms persist, fear returns. They begin checking their reality constantly, searching for proof. In doing so, they repeatedly re-enter the old identity of lack and illness, undoing the very state they are trying to establish. The difference between those who experience change and those who do not is not belief in the beginning. It is persistence in the middle. Neville often explained that imagination is like planting a seed. When a seed is placed in the ground, nothing visible happens immediately. In fact, for a period of time, it looks as if nothing is happening at all. But beneath the surface, invisible processes are unfolding. Roots are forming. Structure is developing. The life of the plant is becoming established long before it breaks through the soil. If the gardener were to dig it up every time they doubted, growth would never be possible. Human consciousness works in the same way. When you assume a new state, whether it is success, love, peace, or freedom, you are planting a seed in the invisible realm. The outer world is simply the soil. And just like the seed, your assumption requires time, stability, and protection from doubt in order to grow. But here is where most people struggle. They keep digging up the seed. Every time they do not see results, they revisit old thoughts. Every time something contradicts their desire, they abandon their inner assumption. They become inconsistent in consciousness, and inconsistency produces inconsistent results. Neville's message was simple but powerful: persist, not in forcing, not in striving, but in returning. Returning again and again to the state of the wish fulfilled, even when appearances disagree. Returning to imagination when circumstances challenge belief. Returning to the feeling of certainty when doubt tries to take over. Persistence is not about ignoring reality. It is about refusing to let reality define your state. Imagine a traveler walking through fog. They cannot see far ahead, but they continue walking in the direction they know is right. If they stopped every time visibility decreased, they would never reach their destination. Faith is not the absence of fog. It is the willingness to keep moving even when the path is not yet visible. This is what Neville meant when he spoke of living from the end. It is not a one-time act. It is a repeated choice, a continuous alignment, a daily return to the assumption that your desire is already fulfilled. And over time, something remarkable happens. The inner state you persist in begins to stabilize. It no longer feels like effort. It becomes natural. You stop trying to believe and simply begin to live from a new identity. At that point, the outer world starts to shift almost effortlessly, as if it had been reorganizing itself quietly all along. You may not notice the exact moment change begins, just as you do not notice the exact moment a sunrise starts. But gradually, the darkness lifts, and what you once imagined begins to appear in form. So the real question is not whether imagination works. The real question is whether you will stay faithful long enough to witness its unfolding. Because those who persist do not just understand Neville Goddard's teachings, they live them. Everything you have heard leads to one simple but life-altering realization. Your future is not something you are waiting to enter. It is something you are already shaping from within this very moment. The life you will live tomorrow is being formed today, not through struggle or effort, but through the state of consciousness you consistently return to. Neville Goddard's teachings always point back to one truth. Imagination is not separate from reality. It is the foundation of it. And if imagination is the foundation, then your inner world is not something passive or meaningless. It is the creative center from which everything you experience must eventually emerge. This means nothing about your life is fixed. Nothing about your current situation is permanent. No delay, no failure, no limitation has the final word over you unless you continue to accept it as your identity. The moment you stop identifying with appearances and start identifying with the state you choose within, something begins to shift that no external force can stop. Your future self has not been waiting in time. It has been calling you through awareness, through desire, through intuition, and through the quiet feeling that there must be more than what you are currently experiencing. That feeling was never random. It was never a mistake. It was an invitation to become, an invitation to imagine differently, an invitation to live from a higher state of being. Most people miss this invitation because they are waiting for certainty before they believe. But belief is not the result of evidence. Belief is the cause of it. You do not wait to see your future before you step into it. You step into it first within imagination, and the world gradually rearranges itself to match that inner movement. There will always be moments when appearances challenge your faith. There will always be moments when nothing seems to be changing. But those moments are not signs of failure. They are simply the silence between planting and harvest. They are the invisible phase where everything is being shaped beneath the surface of awareness. And this is where your power is revealed, not in how quickly things change, but in whether you remain faithful while they are changing invisibly. So today, the invitation is simple. Stop waiting to become the person you desire to be. Start being them now in consciousness. Let your imagination become more real to you than your doubt. Let your assumption become more powerful than your fear. Let your inner vision become the place you return to when the outer world tries to pull you back into old identities. Because the truth is, you are always living from a state. The only question is whether it is a state chosen by habit or a state chosen by awareness. And now you know you can choose. So choose deliberately. Choose the version of you who already has what you desire. Choose the feeling of fulfillment instead of lack. Choose persistence instead of doubt. Choose imagination instead of memory. And if you fall back into old thinking, do not judge yourself, simply return, again and again. Because every return strengthens the identity you are building within. One day, without struggle or surprise, you will look around and realize that the outer world has quietly caught up with the inner world you once imagined. And it will feel less like something arrived and more like something finally revealed itself. Because it was always there in seed form, and you were always the one tending it. So as you move forward from this moment, remember this: your future is not ahead of you waiting to happen. It is within you, waiting to be accepted. And the moment you believe it, truly believe it, not as hope, but as inner knowing, everything begins to change.